Hi there, Steve Kaufman here, and today I want to talk about how to study effectively. Not just how to learn languages, but how to study effectively. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, click on the bell to get notifications. I'd like to do actually a series of 4 videos. I'd like to talk about how to study effectively based on my experience in learning languages, what I've read about learning languages, what I've read about how the brain works, what I remember from when I was at school, some of the things that I think language instruction does that is not successful in schools, and why the same unsuccessful method is used to teach other subjects, causing a lot of frustration for people. So first of all, today I'm simply going to talk about how to study effectively in general. And then in the second in this series, I hope to do a series of 4 actually. In the second series, I'll talk about why I think language instruction in schools is not effective. Then in the third in this series, I want to talk about, learning in a month, or, how to learn quickly, and all of the different hints and tips and hacks that are offered on the internet for how to learn languages quickly, my views on these, and again, tying it all back to studying effectively in general. And then in the final one, I'm going to talk about learning a language from scratch. So how, again, applying the sort of principles of effective study to, learning a language from scratch. So I'm not going to talk about specifically language learning or about LINC. People complain that I mention LINC, although I love LINC and that's where I learn languages. And what we do at LINC, in a sense, is a reflection of my view of how we learn. But I'm going to talk about learning and study, effective study generally. All right. First of all, the first thing I think we need to do to study effectively is to improve our reading skills. If we aren't good readers, we need to become good readers, to read faster, to get better at acquiring information through reading, because reading is very effective, very efficient. It enables us to access so much information, whether in a paper type of book, a traditional book, or an ebook where we can look things up if we're on an iPad or on a computer, being careful to be, to avoid distractions, granted. So reading is super powerful. Also get used to listening. Again, listening is something that we can do wherever we are. We can enjoy the voice of the person explaining. I find reading and listening more effective than video, because with video we are captive. Video can be part of a study plan. It can be fun to watch video. It's sometimes possible to explain things via video in a way that we can't in a book. So I think you need a combination of all 3. So when we talk about combining reading, listening, and video, we're talking about combining. And I think combining is a big part of learning. I found that in learning languages, but not only in learning languages, in learning other subjects, I had to sort of get at whatever I was trying to learn using different approaches, different books, different resources. Don't just try to memorize the textbook. You have to try and force yourself to go out and find other resources that cover the same material. And that's why we combine video with listening, with audio, with reading, because the way the brain works is the brain is not very good at sort of acing something now, learning some specific bits of knowledge or facts, or even some mathematical equation. These are things that we kind of learn them, and it's difficult for the brain. Again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but they go into the hippocampus and they don't stay there very long. But the strength of the brain is its ability to sort of start to identify patterns. And that's why we have to be patient and keep feeding the brain the same kind. I've referred to it as grazing and interleaving, some of the same material interspersed with going off and doing something else and then coming back and reading about this or in some other format. So that this combination learning, grazing learning, is, according to research, much more effective than trying to nail something down. And that's why it's so counterproductive in the school system, where they teach you something, and now because they've taught it to you, therefore they think you should be able to, reproduce it or be tested on it. And of course you can't, so you only get 6 out of 10, which is frustrating. As a learner, we have to remember that however difficult something may seem, whether it be a language or a concept in mathematics or in science or anything else, in time, the brain will develop a pattern that enables us to grasp the concept better and better, slowly. The emphasis is on slowly. And Manfred Spitzer, whom I always quote, he says, the brain can't do otherwise than learn. The brain will gradually learn, create patterns to deal with all the stimulus and information that's coming at it. It'll drop some of the details, but it'll start forming a pattern. And when you have this pattern in your brain, it becomes easier then to remember some of the details because you have a context. The brain has created this network of patterns that makes it then easier to learn. So it's very important not to be frustrated if we read this explanation 5 times and it still doesn't make sense, or we keep forgetting things. And of course we get 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 on the test. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to be discouraged. Of course the education system is set up that way. It's set up that way because for whatever reason, the people in charge of education feel that they have to test you at every step of the way to make sure you're learning something. In reality, what was taught yesterday may not click in for another 6 months. So it's kind of meaningless to test us immediately on what's in our short-term memory, for example. Rather, we should, as teachers, encourage learners to cover the same ground using different material, and we as learners should resist this sort of sense of frustration that we can't understand it, we can't remember it, we can't do it, it doesn't make sense. We have to continue. And that's, again, always, I go back to this idea of combining things. Watch a video, by all means. But then also, if you can find, and in the case of science and math, you have Khan Academy, which is tremendous. But you should still, at the same time, work on your reading. Work on reading explanations of the same thing. Again, without that sense of, frustration or fear as you're still not able to remember or grasp it all. Just keep going. It's slowly going to soak into place, just the way languages slowly soak into place. And, work on all the different aspects of your brain, including the emotional side of your brain. So if you can listen to something that's pleasant, where you enjoy the voice, if you don't like listening to your professor, but if you can find some other audio which is more interesting, or where you enjoy the voice, listen to that. But you still have to go back and read or listen to what the professor had to say, because you gotta write the exam, and most professors like to have things come back to them the way they taught it. But so as a general principle in learning, I think all of the things that I say about language learning, when I think back, when I did well in a subject, it's because I got interested in the subject. I read up on it using different resources. And the other thing too is, as with language learning, of course it's good to talk and exchange views about a subject that you're learning, and to talk to the other people in the class, and to talk to the teacher and so forth. But you have to have something in you before you can talk about the subject. Just as with language learning, you can't begin by speaking. You have to begin by allowing your brain to get used to it. And that's where the reading and the listening primarily, and to some extent a video, is kind of the prerequisite. And once you've got some of those patterns in your brain, then the more you can talk about it and do experiments and do things and activate some of these things that you have brought into your brain, the better you're going to do. So that's sort of a general discussion on how to study effectively. The big message is, to my mind, is don't allow yourself to get frustrated, get hung up at your mistakes, or perhaps your results on a test, or things that you forget. Try to find a way to get interested in the subject. And that may mean that your textbook is boring. Find some other material and graze around and cover the same ground in different ways. And I think that's an effective way to study.